Good afternoon. This is the September 13, 2024 meeting of the House Bill 737 Commission for the Study of Health and Environmental Impacts of Per- and Polyfluorinated compounds. I'm Chris Bandazian, chairing the commission. We have a quorum, and so the meeting is called to order. First item of business is approval of the minutes of the July meeting. And I think my agenda had some old meetings on it, but it's the July minutes. So were there any comments or corrections on the minutes? If not, I would take a motion to approve from somebody. Motion from.
I think Don has a comment.
Yeah, I have a, I wanted to know if there's a, on page 11, the second bullet towards the end of it, it's references a year of 2019, but I think that should be 2018. Because I think that the data was collected on the cancer study through 2018, not through 2019. And if you actually click on the link that's further in the minutes and brings up the DES or the DHHS webpage, and it says on there, it references 2018. So just a suggestion.
Thank you for catching that. No, I think we should make that amendment. Are there any more comments or corrections on the minutes? If not, I'll take a more, Nancy, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank Representative Rung for doing that on my behalf, for taking my spot. Thank you.
Indeed.
Chris?
Rosemary.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Leanne takes a note of that correction, because I just copied and pasted her update into the minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I realized that actually yesterday when I was preparing my notes for this meeting, and I updated it
Oh, okay.
for the update I'll provide today. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, not seeing any. We'll take a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Nancy, second by Ron. All those in favor, please raise your hand so we can see them. Okay, motion carries. And Representative Donnelly, welcome. We'll note your abstention since you were not in attendance. Okay, so that motion passes. I want to thank Attorney Alan Brooks for attending on behalf of the Department of Justice. I've asked him to attend to provide a status on the manufacturer litigation that New Hampshire is involved in. So I guess we'll take questions for Attorney Brooks on that subject. And I'll just jump in. Are we participating in the South Carolina litigation at this point?
Yes, so all of the cases that went to federal court were sent to the multi-district litigation court in South Carolina. We filed two separate cases. We filed an AFFF case, and we filed a case for every other kind of PFAS, with the idea that the AFFF case would properly get removed to federal court. And it was removed to federal court. It is in the MDL. Everything else it was removed to federal court because the defendants made the motion. It has since been sent back to state court, which is where it belongs. Although I'll tell you that they have appealed that decision to the First Circuit. We argued that decision many, many months ago and are waiting for a decision from the First Circuit. Nevertheless, it technically is in state court now and can proceed. So it is proceeding, but slowly, because the state court, I think, just doesn't want to rush ahead when it's still waiting to see what the First Circuit is going to do. And this now gets more complicated, however, because the MDL court in South Carolina has approved certain settlements, and those settlements actually take in more than just AFFF PFAS. All of the settlements for DuPont and 3M, the class action settlements that we will be a part of, and that we have opted into actually includes all kinds of PFAS, but only as they relate to public water systems.
Don?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for coming on here, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate your attendance here. I guess the one question I have is the settlement money that is going to be accumulated. Is that going to be disbursed to public water supplies in New Hampshire who qualified for the settlement under the MDL, the settlement agreement? Because from my understanding is the smaller public water supplies may not have qualified for the settlement. I don't know if that's true or not. And I'm just referencing the settlement tables that I've seen, and it looks like some of the minimum pumping rates are higher than the pumping rates for some of the small public water supplies. So I'm wondering if that is going to be disseminated essentially to all of the qualified public water supplies in the same amount that they were going to qualify for under the settlement agreement, or is that going to be also spread around to the other public water suppliers that would not have qualified in this settlement agreement with 3M and DuPont?
Thank you, Don. That's a good question. And it starts with a very complicated answer, but kind of gets to an easier answer at the end. So we sued in our parents' patriotic capacity. So we sued on behalf of everybody in the state who has been impacted by PFAS. The strange thing about that is we subsume all of those claims, and we control those claims, and we can settle those claims or we can litigate those claims. But the money that we get back doesn't necessarily go to anybody that was harmed, or even to do anything that addresses PFAS. It could go in the general fund, it could go to pay for schools or roads or anything else. And so without other legislation, it could go anywhere, and it would generally go into the general fund. However, there was legislation a few years ago, and then more recently, just the last session, to make it more specific, that says all of the money that we get back from this case is not going to go anywhere other than the Drinking Water Trust Fund. I mean, we have to pay fees and some other things, but for the most part, it goes to the Drinking Water Trust Fund. And it shall be used to pay back public water systems. It doesn't say more than that. It's up to the Drinking Water Trust Fund to decide how to dole that out. And they had a meeting last week where they began talking about that. And I don't think that they finalized that. And I think Mike was there, and he can tell me if I'm wrong, whether they reached a final vote on that. But they are considering how and under what terms to give it out to public water systems.
All set, Don? Okay, Nancy?
Thank you for that answer. I have a question just on that same line. You said that the state filed on the parents' patriotic capacity. Is that why is that? Why are like municipalities, and I'm thinking in Merrimack in particular, ratepayers here had to come up with out of our pockets $14.5 million to address this. So we, the impacted population, paid for this. And it was my understanding that this funding was to address municipalities. Why were our municipalities here not allowed to apply for that directly, since we're directly impacted, and reimburse, our ratepayers? Just because we sort of started and got to recognize that this was an issue early on, and we didn't want to continue with pumping contaminated public water to homes. I'm confused about, number one, why municipalities here could not file for that and directly reimburse the ratepayers where the money came from, and why there would be any question for that money coming back to us would not go directly back to municipalities.
Thank you for those questions too, and I'll probably harken back to some of the things that happened in one of our prior cases that you know about, I'm sure, which is MTBE. But we established that we actually have that authority when we brought the MTBE case, and it's well settled that, again, you don't have to, as a state that brings that case, that you don't have to give that money back to the people that were injured or anything else, which is inherently unfair, right? Because those are the people that you sued on their behalf. And that is why legislation has been put in place to change that system, to make it sure that we can't put it anywhere else, and it has to go back to the public water systems. But the reason that you do it strategically is to maximize your value, to make sure that people are getting paid back in general. So there are some water systems in an MTBE, there were some, let's say, municipalities or other people impacted who were fairly on the ball and were interested in it. But the state made the decision that a lot of people were going to fall through the cracks if we didn't subsume all of them and take all those claims together. And so we made that decision. The cities of Dover and I think Portsmouth, but Dover kind of continued to press that. Portsmouth, I think, ended up in a different posture at the end of the day with respect to their damages. But they sued and said, why can't we as a city who has looked at this have our own claims? Why, how can you let the state subsume those claims? And they lost that case. The decision from the New Hampshire Supreme Court was that the DOJ can use that parents patriarch authority. And again, it's in the public interest to do that overall. It may not be to the absolute maximum benefit of a particular water system, but strategically, it generally helps overall. And when we made the decision in this case, it was many years ago, and it was at a time where people's awareness was not nearly as high. And we made that decision right away to jump in and say, we're going to take these cases forward now. We also, just so you know, because we were an early litigating state, we get a litigation bump in the amount of damages we will get back at the end of the day. So we do have a benefit from having done that and having done it early. So I see another question there.
Nancy, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, I sounds like there seems to be benefit to the state, but I feel like it's a real disservice to impacted communities who are paying for this and sort of having to beg for the money back to reimburse, you know, whatever, we have 28,000 people in this town. And it sounds like it was settled. That was a lot of, are we the only state that does that, or other states in the nation, do they do that?
No, we're the only one. And in this case, we're the only one. There's many issues there that states will operate parents patriae, and many different states do it in many different areas. But we were one of the first in the PFAS realm, partly because DES was one of the first agencies who really regulated it and understood that it was a contaminant. And so we were in that early. We made the decision fairly early to do that. And I know it's not satisfying to hear that someone else has control over some thing that's going back, you know, and it's supposed to be for damages that you've suffered.
Right.
But again, as a state, we made that decision. And I can tell you with pretty great certainty that as a state, we will be many, many millions and probably tens of millions of dollars better off than other states who are allowing private water systems to act on their own, many of whom will fail to fill out the forms correctly or do it on time, or maybe even be aware that they're supposed to do it at all.
I don't know. I have faith in our water municipality doing the right thing, and I don't know. You know, it surprises me, number one, that we're the only state to learn that, to learn that. And you know, I guess it is what it is, but I would certainly hope that the funds from that Merrimack encumbered, that we paid for, actually come back to what my understanding is, the municipalities. So anyway, that's my point. But go ahead, move on. Thank you.
And it's a good point, but you know, we all have a higher awareness today than we did many years ago. And when we filed the lawsuit, we had a very big press release, and we had a press conference actually with Governor Sununu, who you know, on TV, and it was live. And at that time, nobody came forward and said, as a municipality, they really wanted to bring their own claim. I think everybody was happy that we were taking the ball forward. But as we go forward, you know, again, people refine their thinking and learn more and go forward.
I'm confused by that, but okay, thank you.
Okay.
Doreen?
Hi, I mean, I really strongly feel that just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's the simplest way I can put it. You know, my understanding of this lawsuit, you know, I saw presentations by the lead attorney, and he was very proud of this. You know, you may know him, and here you're in the same field as he is. And one of the reasons he brought this suit forward was his father was a water worker. His father was a water operator in Central Mass, and he grew up and he had a high level of understanding, and he was quite aware that money and settlements don't often get to where they're supposed to. And it was a very simple, beautiful system, you know, where utilities would go, fill it in a formula with the data they have, boom, here is your award, and here is your money to reimburse the costs and the time and the stress and God, the mental anguish of all those guys, what they've been through. So we have heard no reassurance. And I hear what you're saying. Now you're bumping it to the trust fund. So I guess we have to talk to them. But it's really disheartening, you know, because I know based on that formula exactly what the Merrimack Village District was qualifying for. It didn't pay us back completely, but it did a good significant amount, you know, to reduce our water bills, which I believe, Dawn, are somewhere in the area of 70% higher at this point. So I just have to say I'm really disappointed. I also have to note with the MTBE decision, I was familiar with that years ago, is, you know, when PFAS came along and everybody was saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Who's going to pay for this? You know, remember back then when Chuck Morris and a couple of folks said, oh, wait a second, we just happen to have this money from MTBE. Well, if that money was sitting around X amount of years later, it behooves me to wonder, did it get to where it was intended? You know, I remember hearing from a rep from Swansea in the beginning of this who was very clear that there were still private wells and different people who were highly contaminated. And there was someone in Bedford I spoke to about this issue who it never really got to where it needed to go. So it's good for the state, but it isn't good for the people. If there's anything, you know, you can do to kind of right this wrong, because it is, you know, we've been through plenty here. You know, everybody's doing their job in their offices, and those are very important jobs. But to know what our community has been through for 8 years, not just financially, emotionally, physically, on and on and on, it's been in battling and trying to deal with the policy and everything has to be legislated and directed after the fact. And then it meets obstruction in the Senate, who says this isn't a legislative issue, this is a legal issue. And we explain why it's a dead end legally and nothing happens. So that was a little blend of mostly my thoughts and opinions, but I really, really want you to know that that is how people feel of both parties around here when they know the information. When they hear there's money, everybody's happy. But when they start hearing the details in the background of it, they're going, what? Do you have that right? I do have it right, and you know that. And I really think it's wrong. This is the only state in the nation who has done this. That doesn't make us pat ourselves on the back. I know PFAS impacted community leaders and advocates from 30 out of the 50 states, and I know what's happening there with this class suit. And it was very simple. So small municipalities were reached out to, and the states could have let them know, very user-friendly to apply to. And those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was well said. And I think that if I were in your position, I'd be saying many of the same things, and hopefully as well as you said them. But I want to back up and maybe just give you some different perspectives on that. For the MTBE case, all of the money has not gone out. It still has not gone out. I think the MTBE program, which was in 2 phases, one was the settlement money and 2 was the money that went to the trust fund, has actually been very successful. And we have both quarterly reports and annual reports that are publicly available. I think that's really something that the department has run and can be very proud of, and how efficient it has done it. The Drinking Water Trust Fund looked at what came in at that time for MTBE and looked at the problem and said, look, if we just give all this money back right now, it's not going to be nearly enough, and we're going to have other problems. And so they came up with a plan. And I'll just tell you that if you look at the verdict form in MTBE, the jury found that New Hampshire was harmed to the tune of about $813 million. But because Exxon was only part of that market, the verdict for Exxon was only about $308 million and change. So it was well short of what the damages would have been. Had the money just been spent on that, it would have fallen well short. And so the trust fund said, maybe we can leverage this. Maybe over time, we can manage this fund in a way that more people will get paid eventually. And so they set up basically a 40-year program through a combination of grants and loans and outside funding. And since that time, it's been augmented by $50 million capacity of state bonds and some other measures to say, how can we stretch the money we got to be the most efficient and cover the most ground. So I think that's the reason why that's there. But having been, talking to communities, and I think Mike Winsack can tell you more, that many of the people are very happy with the way the MTBE money has been paid out. With respect to our decision to be Parents Patriot, I am very proud of that decision. I think that was the right decision to make, especially at the time. Again, we're an early litigating state. We do get a litigation bump that those other states probably won't get. I think that our water systems will do vastly better than many of the other states' water systems that are out there for that reason. And at this point, it's not hypothetical that public water systems are going to be paid back, because again, the legislation that was worked on by Senator Waters and Senator Bradley, and I think Bill Boyd probably had a hand in that, and the DES commissioner was involved in brainstorming that, made sure that the money will just go to public water systems. And at the last Drinking Water Trust Fund meeting, it wasn't just a hypothetical, it was a plan to say, okay, let's take that formula, what you're talking about. Let's take the formula and make sure it gets back out into all the public water systems in proportion to what they would have gotten with respect to the amount of money that we will actually receive. There may be some nuances to that, like some smaller water systems that have an impact that was maybe below 4 parts per trillion that maybe qualified for some payment, may or may not get paid. I don't know the details that will be settled upon, but I believe that basically there will be a proportional, or at least a proposal that's pretty well received, there will be a proportional payout to public water systems where they don't have to do the usual process for Drinking Water Trust Fund, which is when you come on bended knee and you say, I have an application, I'd like to do this, and doesn't it look nice and all these other things. I think it's going to be a much more streamlined process than that.
Rosemary?
Thank you. Let me start. Got my, thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. So the settlement is going to the Drinking Water Trust Fund. Is there anything that would prohibit that trust fund or that commission to award MVD the money that it spent on filtration to date? Are they totally obligated to honor that formula, or can they reimburse MVD for the expenditures it's had to do to clean up our water?
The only requirement that they have to meet is the legislative requirement that says it has to go back out to public water systems, and that could be in any arrangement of grants and loans. I think the only thing that they would be maybe constrained about, because it was just mentioned a couple times, was the fairness of everything. And I think they'll have to examine the fairness of saying, they don't want to give MVD a bump at the expense of someone else who was due something under that same settlement as well. So they may be looking at how to do that in the way that's most fair.
Okay, but it would be their decision. So we could appeal to them, because I think you're aware of what the levels of PFOA and PFOS were in our water, and the fact that MVD had to raise millions and millions to build those plants. It took years. We still have many people in Merrimack on bottled water. So when we talk about fairness, I think it's absolutely fair, and I would hope the commissioners would agree that appealing to the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund for just that reimbursement of that capital expenditure is fair, particularly when I can't even think of any other public water systems who even come close to dealing what we've dealt with. And actually, I was the one that drove those 2 petition warrant articles to get the funding for those filtration sites, and it was very well communicated through our community and to the state that we fully expect any settlement would go to reimburse the ratepayers for that capital fund. So we're going to do whatever we can to get that back. That was our promise to our constituents, that we weren't going to hold the bag. If there was going to be a settlement by the manufacturers because those manufacturers supplied Saint-Gobain, that they should cover our costs. We shouldn't be left holding the bag for cleaning our water. And I don't know of any other community, maybe outside of the Seacoast, where they've had issues with AFFF at Pease, but we've suffered health consequences. We're in a phase 3 kidney renal cancer study right now. So putting us at par with other water systems in New Hampshire, that's what's unfair.
Right. When I say that, and again, to emphasize, it is their decision. So I'm not trying to say or even guide their decision in that respect. That's a policy decision. I won't have a hand in that, and I don't really want to have a hand in that. But one of the prior statements was we knew how much we were going to get under the formula. If that formula were in place, if we didn't sue Parents Petra, you wouldn't have the ability to ask the trust fund to do something different or to recognize these things. You'd have a formula, you'd get paid, and that would be the end. So that is your conduit to communication is with the trust fund.
Okay.
Gary?
Yes. I guess my sense that being a budget year, I don't know if there's a backdoor chance to get some impact legislatively to affect the budget such that some of these funds are appropriated appropriately. Unfortunately, New Hampshire does have a terrible track record. All you have to do is look at the smoking settlement, the tobacco settlement, and see where the money went. It didn't go for education. So our track record isn't very good, but we may have a chance with the budget cycle coming up.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Maureen?
Thank you very much, and thank you for being available to take questions and give an overview of this. On August 12th, I was watching WMUR, and the next thing you know, this is a headliner, and on it was a member of my delegation who's not a member of this commission who's talking on it. I've received constituent inquiries, but I have seen nothing in writing. Is there any way we can get anything in writing, or maybe it's somewhere I haven't looked yet and it has been sent out or whatever, but to see this ourselves as it's written?
Yes. And in terms of early communication, just so you know, every public water system did get 2 letters explaining the process that was going on and that the submittals of information, because DES had to divert resources to actually make those submittals. And so there's a lot of contact early on. Generally, this was happening. There is a website, and I can give that to Chris and Mike to make sure that you all get it on the distribution list. And all of that information is public. The actual settlement documents are public. I'm not going to say that they're exceedingly fun to read, but they're all there, and you don't have to take someone's word for it. You can see all of the different terms.
Thank you.
Great. Don?
Yeah, real quick. I was wondering, my understanding was some years ago there, and I believe they're still pending, your office filed 2 litigation claims against the manufacturers. Does this settlement from DuPont under the MDL affect those 2 litigation claims? My understanding is everything is still dealing with the manufacturers. I'm not sure if one of those original claims was for reimbursement for all affected water supplies, including private wells, obviously, which obviously need to be addressed, and I know that's being pursued. But does this MDL settlement, does it like usurp one of those other 2 litigation claims, or are those 2 other litigation claims still pending? And if they are still pending, where would the settlement for those claims be apportioned to?
Good questions again. And so I think the best way for me to answer that is I'm going to describe, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll describe the full path of both of these, the 2 lawsuits that we had. And after I'm done, I want to give you, Don, a chance to ask me a follow-up question if you need to, because it makes sense to me, but it's not necessarily easy to explain. So I want to make sure that you get the answer that you want. So again, we filed 2 different cases. There's a case for just AFFF that went to federal court, a case for everything else. AFFF case was for every type of damage for AFFF. That case went to South Carolina where it sits today. The other case was for everything that had to do with everything that wasn't AFFF. But the settlements in South Carolina that we're talking about ended up being broader than AFFF, but they were only for public water systems. So they will settle every claim for every PFAS, but only for public water systems. So all private wells in New Hampshire for AFFF are still alive in the MDL. And we're trying to push those cases forward. We're actually suggested to the judge that we be a bellwether state and actually do the New Hampshire trial before the other sovereigns, because we have good law and we know what we're doing, we have good data. All of the private well systems will be alive in the state case as well for the non-AFFF, and they will go. And those, I'll tell you that in MTV, again, most of the damages were assigned not to public water systems and not even to remediating individual wells, but to testing individual wells to figure out where all of the substances were. There's about 250,000 private wells in New Hampshire, and to go around and test them and retest them when you have to, and then install treatment is a huge damage, none of which has been addressed by these settlements.
Yeah, and I guess the follow-up question that I would have is, I guess I'm still wondering, so this MDL settlement, the 65 million that has been in the press release, other than that, are public water supplies in New Hampshire still potentially, is it still on the table for public water supplies to get potentially these additional settlements from the other two litigations? That I know one of them is related to AAF, so that may not be appropriate for public water supplies that have been affected by AFFF. So I guess I'm wondering, is this really it for public water supplies, this MDL settlement, or is there still some potential for some kind of award through one or two of the other private cases that are still ongoing?
Again, good question. And the unsatisfying thing I said before may be slightly more satisfying now on the other side. So in MTBE, most of that money was for private wells, but it went into the trust fund, and a lot of that money ended up going to public water systems because that seemed to be the best use of that money, especially when those systems could expand and provide service to other folks. And so whatever money we get from the rest of either settlements or from litigation, right now, almost all of that, some of it is designated to go to the rainy day fund, just so you know. Some of it is designated to go pay off bonds that were used for the PFAS program. After that and costs, the remainder will go into the trust fund and the drinking water trust fund, and the trust fund can decide how to use it. And public water systems can come and say, we're the highest and best use of the money that's in there, regardless of what lawsuit or what settlement that it came from. You can ask for that.
Thank you.
I just want to add one little piece to that. Everything you said makes sense from a financial perspective and a logistical perspective, logically, but there's the right thing to do when we talk about the highest and best use of money. You know that in this area, what we have for data mapping, DES has done immense work. They were ahead of the nation years ago in their data, and they really delved into it very specifically. Error modeling that goes back 15 years. We know the contamination goes outside of the consent decree area, and where those lines were drawn were very convenient for Saint-Gobain. So at the end of the day, we don't have polluter accountability. We know the responsible party. DES has sent letter after letter. Andy Fuller just sent one recently pointing out some very specific points to Saint-Gobain, and the pushback is there consistently. So, with all respect to the state, I don't feel that anyone has truly gone to bat for us to the extent that we need it as a community. We do feel left on our own to some extent, and we don't have that accountability. So we really, it sounds really foolish to say we're owed this, right? But that's what it boils down to. It's the right thing to do. And I think we will address the trust fund folks because we'll need to, but who knows, when we talk about highest and best use and how far the money can go and all that stuff, that's how it goes in New Hampshire. I've heard that for years and years and years, but we really need somebody official in our corner to kind of say, we were told by your office and the governor 6 years ago, I believe, that we can't use the resources of our office on behalf of one community. You know, it really needs to be, or work benefits the whole state. So this work follows that philosophy. It benefits the whole state. But at the end of the day, we are this community with an unduly burdensome, you know, the burden. And keep in mind, with MTBE is a known carcinogen. You know, when that's what I meant before when I said, did it really go to where it needed to go? We have to look at the timely manner of this from a public health perspective. Exposure is getting lost in this. Merrimack exposure has been there. It's cumulative. We see it everywhere. MTB, there's cancer clusters in certain communities with private well impacts of MTBE, and pediatric cancers that haven't even been looked at. So we just have to take a step back, I think, and say, what is justice, right? I mean, for anybody here who has law backgrounds, you know, I just hope I can remind you, I would assume you went down that path once upon a time with the concept of justice. Justice is really important to me as a clinical social worker, and what I see and what I don't see. We have to line those things up. We have to get the logistics and the commonsensical and good old how we grow our money and how we make it, you know, go further and what we can do with it. But we have to do the right thing by this area. And it's, you know, it really needs to be made right, and we need to be made whole again. Thank you.
Mindy?
Thanks, Mr. Brooks, for joining us today. I just was wondering if you could give us an update on any kind of following up on Rosemary's question, what might be happening with respect to recovering some damages from St. Gobain. I know the state has really laid out a lot of money and time in evaluating areas where St. Gobain's refused to address them, and there's areas outside of you know, the consent decree area that are clearly impacted. It's not just one town, it's, you know, 5 or 6, depending on how far it's gone, and we can prove it. And you know, when there might be some question about whether the community of Merrimack in particular is fully reimbursed for the taxpayer expenditure, is there going to be some other effort to take on not only the manufacturers, but also these companies who have, like St. Gobain, not just St. Gobain, but St. Gobain, who has clearly polluted our communities?
Yes, thank you for that question. And obviously, this is, you know, St. Gobain is ground zero for us for PFAS in New Hampshire. I guess TCI maybe is ground 0.1, and then it's kind of everything kind of flows from that. But so we've looked at it a lot, and the agency has looked at it a lot over those 6 years, and it's never been kind of a single prong approach. I think the agency has often been looking at, okay, what are our real litigation alternatives with St. Gobain, but what else can we do? So there is the $50 million in bonding capacity that has started to be used and to go out, and I think that will grow over the years. There's the rebate program that's become hopefully more and more subscribed to. I think it was kind of undersubscribed originally, and maybe more people now are learning about it. And so, you know, and I'm sure that there are discussions with the federal government about how they are going to treat it now that they've decided on new MCLs and new standards. So it's never just one thing. Folks are looking at how to do this. Obviously, there's a difference between inside the outer boundary of the consent decree and outside. And we haven't even gotten everything that we need to get on the inside. We're working that. And if we don't get what we need, we may be in a different posture. With respect to MVD in particular, obviously with at least, I think, the 2 wells, there's an independent settlement. I know you've all heard this many, many times, but there is an agreement, and that does provide that MVD will indemnify St. Gobain for whatever they have to pay out. And so I think there needs to be creativity. It's not just kind of a bull rush, I think, at St. Gobain for that. I think we have to figure out what other sources can solve some of these problems because it got fairly complicated.
Other questions? Mike, did you want to add something? Go ahead.
I did, yeah. And I first of all, I really appreciate Alan being here to provide all this information. But I wanted to give a little bit of DES perspective on the work associated with the settlement. Really, no doubt in my mind that for water systems in New Hampshire, public water systems in New Hampshire, potential funding that will go to the public water systems was absolutely maximized as a result of the lawsuit and the way that the state handled it. And DES worked, and this was really spearheaded by Brandon Kernan, so he tells the story a little better than I do, but hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time, weekends and nights, and you name it. The requirements for the settlement, the data collection requirements in order to demonstrate what each state was or what each water system was entitled to with respect to the settlement were really substantial and pretty onerous. And our staff, led by Brandon and his group in the Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau and staff in our MTB Bureau, worked mightily to collect all that information. It wasn't just information that water systems normally collect. They might have data on their blended water. Well, you needed to have individual samples with a certain number of contaminants of different types of PFAS from each of your sources. And so we went out and at over 500 water systems, and I have to give kudos to a lot of the water system operators who made themselves available at times they hadn't planned for, to take these samples to make sure that we were getting all the data that was necessary to maximize the amount of settlement money that each public water system might be entitled to. And they did that, and we used some federal funding and a lot of hard work and staff time to really take both that labor and that cost burden off of our public water systems. The way they set it up, they wanted 29 or a certain number of contaminants. And in order to get all those contaminants, we had to actually use 2 different testing methods. So we had to get duplicate samples to be run through 2 separate sampling methods. The cost of those sampling methods for each water system was $500, $250 for each sampling method. And it would have been, and that's under a very favorable state contract. It would have been even more if the individual water systems had to do that. Plus the data collection that we were able to do and help them, collect their data, I think really took a lot of burden off these systems. We know anecdotally that in a lot of other states, and as Ellen said, we're the only state that did this for our water systems. In a lot of other states, a lot of water systems started pulling together information and never pressed the button to submit their information on time. So there's a lot of water systems in a lot of states that are not going to be entitled to anything because it was really onerous to do this. And I'm really proud of the work that our staff did on behalf of the state's public water systems to get this together. And if you combine that with that assistance and the litigation bump that Alan mentioned, no doubt in my mind whatsoever that our public water systems are going to get more than they ever would have been able to get on their own. So I just wanted to share that. I know that doesn't answer the specific questions specific to Merrimack and the expenditures that have been made in your community, but I did want you to know that, on behalf of all the systems in the state, we worked mightily to try to make sure that all these systems were entitled to as much of a settlement as they could. And it has to be said, it's not going to be full. It's not going to make anyone whole. I don't know whether it's going to be pennies or dimes on the dollar or what it's going to work out to, but it's not, the nature of settlements is that nobody ever gets made whole. And so what we tried to do was make sure that we got as close to that as possible for these water systems. And I think, the work that we did in order to prepare a, conceptual plan for administering that. I also want to emphasize that the law that was passed this past session absolutely guarantees that all those funds that are brought in from this settlement go to the trust fund and then get passed through to public water systems. That doesn't allow them to use it for other purposes. So those funds that are associated with settlement absolutely will go to public water systems. And the plan is to focus on systems that have actually expended or will expend funds to address PFAS exceedances. So it's never perfect, but boy, I have to say, if I were knowing what I know, if I were just John Q. citizen sitting in my living room, I would be really proud and happy for what my state did on behalf of the public water systems. And then, with that, I guess I'm happy to answer any questions from DES's perspective as well, but I wanted to share that with you.
Go ahead, Dan.
So, sorry to be commandeering the discussion here, but that's a great perspective, Mike, that the state taking on behalf of the public water supplies that may not have the resources to certainly delve into this in the time it took. And I agree, probably a lot of public water supplies would have missed the opportunity. I know in other states, I do business in Massachusetts in my own engineering consulting business, and there's a lot of water suppliers there that weren't even aware of the settlement. So that's a good thing. You know, it's a little different situation for the larger public water supplies that have the resources like MBD does. So, you know, we'll be very interested to see, you know, what that, the amount that comes to MBD, hopefully, you know, where that stands. And we understand that, you know, hopefully we can recoup essentially what the settlement amount was intended to be awarded from the settlement. So I appreciate that perspective, because there are a lot of smaller systems or the ones that just don't have the resources that probably couldn't have done all of this. I'm happy to hear too that there's this additional a bump, I guess it was the way it was presented. So that's a good thing. You know, if the total amount awarded is greater than the individual amount collectively that would have been awarded through individual claims, that's a great thing too, because that's just additional money there. So and you know, don't take our questions as criticism. I just want to make sure that, you know, that I get that message out there too. And I guess the only other question was, what is the timing of the disbursements of these? I think they're in 3 phases, if I'm not mistaken. Just generally, do you know what the timing of that is?
Yeah, I don't have that memorized. My understanding is that it will be in, you know, the whole settlement was grouped into a phase 1 and a phase 2, and phase 2 is still we're still be collecting data for that, so that's down the road. Phase 1, the payments are likely to come. We think we won't see any payment probably until at least the turn of the year, although it's hard to say at this point. And that will be a portion, and then a portion maybe a few months later, or within a couple of years. And then there's a second part of that is over a period of like 9 years. So, you know, there's going to be some details to figure out how that money gets allocated and distributed. But I do want to assure you, under the law, those funds are, you know, absolutely earmarked and protected to go to public water systems.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, I guess we're going to move on to oh, sorry, Nancy.
Oops. Thank you. Sorry, actually my battery's running out here. Quick question. Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for being here to answer all these questions. My last question is because I know it came up in the community when they heard that we could not apply for to be part of that suit on our own, was that New Hampshire, the state owns the groundwater. I assume that is that part of this parents, patriarch, whatever it is, capacity, is that where in the statute is that, I think is really the question. I don't know how to refer people, and I know people have asked, why are we different? So I just, you know, if you could just maybe send Chris a note or Mike, and he could just share it so that we can share it.
Yeah, I think the language is in RSA 485-C, I think. But I will send it to Chris and Mike so that you can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just echo what Don has said. I mean, our DES and Justice Department employees and staff are really impressive. You know, we're a lean state in terms of staffing, and the effort and accomplishments are continuing to impress. So very grateful for that. Alan, it's been very helpful to us to learn the relationship between the two litigations that are pending and what the status is. So I appreciate your being here today. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So next on our agenda, Mike, if we want to move right into the DES update, we can do that.
Be happy to do that. So, and again, I'll be providing a copy of these notes to the clerk, and I'll try to go over the new news. I try to also include some old news in it, just so that someone reading it for the first time has some background, but I won't necessarily go over all the text and the notes that I provide. Starting off with the Air Resources Division update. We did actually make a visit to St. Gobain on August 21st with representatives of a number of our regulatory programs to their Merrimack facility to try to kind of get an update on where they're at with decommissioning the facility. And for the Air Division, there's been some back and forth on a couple of engines, generators at the facility, and whether they would remain or whether both of them would remain. At this point, it seems like both will remain. At least one of them is necessary and important to providing emergency backup power for fire suppression equipment at the facility, which obviously is important as long as the building is there. So we believe at this point, we understand they're going to keep both those engines there. And what that probably means is they will need an Air Division permit. We do permit emergency generators because they burn fuel and they have emissions. So our Air Division staff will be, they participated in that site visit and had some discussions about that. And they will be probably engaged in some work on the permitting issue for those engines. But as far as any other, there are no more manufacturing operations or emissions coming from the facility. So that part of the permit would be presumably extinguished. Moving on to, and by the way, if anyone raises their hand, I'm only working with one screen here and I'm looking at my notes. So if somebody wanted to pipe in with a question, it's not that I'm ignoring you, I just don't see you. So Chris, if you could, if there's someone who wants to break in, by all means, I'm happy to answer questions en route. With regard to the facility closure, as I said, we did conduct a site visit on August 21st to review the condition of the facility and get an update on their closure activities. And as of the end of August, the following activities have been completed or initiated. And I'm just going to go through these because I think they're of interest to folks. Fabric coating operations ceased as of January of this year. Electrical and plumbing permits were obtained from the town of Merrimack in accordance with local requirements, and work to disconnect plumbing and electrical power to offline equipment has been completed. Asbestos containing material and related surveys for the equipment being removed have been completed, and all equipment identified as containing ACM, asbestos containing material, has reportedly been removed, handled, and disposed of in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements. All manufacturing equipment has been removed from the facility. Remaining waste materials at the facility are being containerized, packaged, and transported in accordance with applicable regulations. Operation rinse pits have been power washed. Wash waters and sludge materials have been containerized and transported for proper offsite disposal. The wastewater pretreatment system has been removed from the facility, and the closed loop system holding tanks were pumped out into vac trucks and transported for proper offsite disposal as part of the removal process. All water has been removed from the subgrade vault that is located under the compressor building. The water was containerized in vac trucks and transported for proper offsite disposal. The regenerative thermal oxidizer, or RTO, has been disassembled and removed from the facility with the exception of the combustion chamber and associated media. The company is awaiting characterization of the media so that it can be transported for proper offsite disposal. A new fence has been installed around the perimeter of the property to secure access to the facility. And St. Gobain has coordinated with the town to abandon the sewer line from the building. The sewer line has been pressure grouted from the St. Gobain manhole near the sewer main for Merrimack up to the facility. St. Gobain is coordinating the excavation of approximately 20-foot section of sewer line between the main and the St. Gobain manhole, and that section is associated with the railroad crossing there. So they're needing to coordinate with railroad flaggers to get that work done. I think they expect to have that work done sometime in September or October. So we've requested another update letter to get a current status report. And I was actually hoping to have that in hand today, but I don't have it yet. I expect to get it soon. And of course, we'll continue to remain in frequent contact with the company as decommissioning continues to ensure the property doesn't pose any additional risk to human health or the environment following closure. And so with that, moving on to our general division update. As of September 3rd, There were 660 POET systems that have been installed. And of course, as you all know, and we've talked about it before, there's a approval and confirmation testing process that goes on, and it's described in my notes. So based on that, of those 660, 646 systems are considered officially complete and operational. Again, there's additional information about that, but I won't go through that because I've talked about that many times. I do want to note here, and Alan made some allusion to this. As you know, DES implemented a rebate program to the benefit of property owners whose wells had been impacted by PFAS contamination, but had not been offered any safe water remedy from any third party or responsible party. We had a little burp in the action on that because we were operating with the funds under an approval from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. Those funds were becoming exhausted, and we needed to move to funding that was under our general budget from PFAS funding that was provided. And in order to do that, we needed to have administrative rules to administer the program. And those rules were not ready yet. So we actually are getting ready to file those rules, but we didn't really want the program to be suspended for what might have been as much as a year because of that. So as part of House Bill 1649, which many folks are familiar with because it did a lot of things, we received permission from the legislature to operate the rebate program in the absence of administrative rules for up to 1 year. We don't think it'll be that long. We expect to file rules this fall and get them in place sometime in the first or second quarter of the new year. But in the meantime, that allowed us to reopen the rebate program. It is reopened effective of September 9th, earlier this week. And it's open to eligible property owners testing above the EPA federal MCL of 4 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS. I just want to make you aware that that's there, and we're getting plenty of calls to that, and that interest in that program seems to be stepping up. So that's great. Saint-Gobain is proceeding with design and construction work for waterline installations for the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, and Merrimack. These are areas with existing water lines where homes require connections to the water mains in the street, and areas where new water mains will be installed. Construction associated with the Hillcrest Road water main extension area of Litchfield has been underway since October of last year. All water mains for this project have been installed and tested. The water meter installations began in April, and 43 residences have been disconnected from their water supply well and are receiving water provided by the utility. Connection of water services are expected to be completed around October. The water utility has indicated 33 properties have declined connection to the water line. 15 of those properties have opted to have a line extended from the curb stop to their house, but not to connect. And 10 residences did not respond to notices from both the water utility and from DES. And then 8 residences provided a response indicating that they declined connection to the municipal water. The water utility will install a curb stop at those 18 locations. Saint-Gobain has completed the design for service connections to existing water mains in the towns of Bedford and Londonderry. Service application requests have been sent to 32 eligible properties, and completed applications have been received for 28. The water utility indicated that the contractor completed property inspections in early August and started connections during the week of August 19th. The water utility reported that significant bedrock, commonly known as ledge, was encountered on Kimball Road, so that slowed things down a little bit. Saint-Gobain's consultant has finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack, Wildcat, Brenda Lane service connections. Service application requests have been provided to all eligible properties. Work associated with the water main extensions on Brenda, John, and Edward Lanes has not started while Saint-Gobain and the contractor complete an amendment to the contract to include the town of Merrimack on the bond. The contractor believes the water main installation will be completed this calendar year, and that connections to the water main may extend into 2025. Connections to existing water mains in Merrimack and Bedford began in July of this year. The contractors installed the service line from the stop to end at 22 locations. A total of 6 properties have not responded to application requests for these areas. St. Gobain is working with a water utility in the town of Londonderry to evaluate the feasibility of water line extensions in the town. The conceptual design was completed by the water utility on behalf of St. Gobain in spring of 23. DES has met with St. Gobain, the town of Londonderry, and water utility multiple times to discuss expanded water service in this area. Londonderry has been approved by the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund Advisory Commission for an $8 million grant to supplement the town's and the company's contributions to the larger project. Negotiations between the town and St. Gobain continue. On April 6th of 23, we received a letter from the company that proposed to delay submittal of an application for a groundwater management permit until completion of a second set of PFAS samples from all drinking water wells at the site. DES concurred that a confirmation sample from all drinking water wells would assist in delineating the boundary of the GMZ, groundwater management zone, and developing the long-term monitoring plan that's required under the permit. DES issued an approval letter back on May of 23 and requested that the application for permit be submitted to us by May of this year. St. Gobain and DES met to discuss the application on May 7th. Based on the outcome of the meeting, it was determined that St. Gobain would not submit an application in June of 24 as was anticipated. They've indicated they will propose to conduct long-term monitoring on drinking water wells under a work plan. We requested that the work plan be submitted no later than June 22nd. The work plan outline was received in June, and we provided an approval with comment on July 30th of 2024. And that there are hot links in the notes that I'll provide that allow you to see those particular documents, as with a number of other documents throughout my notes. So DES has been periodically receiving updated proposals from the company to remedy additional water supply wells within the consent decree area following the initial agreements in April and June of 2022. This includes term sheet attachment 20, which was received and reviewed by DES in July of this year. That attachment includes an updated list of remedies for all properties since the April 22 proposal. And a new proposal was submitted just this month and is under review, with some additional homes recommended for either waterline connections or POETs. So moving on to water supply well sampling, the company presented a work plan for residential well sampling and 18 addenda to that plan relative to the ambient groundwater quality standard that we set back in 2019. And that most recent addenda would be dated January 8th of this year. DES approved proposed sampling outline in that addendum later in the month in January. And their consultant, WSP Golder, has been retesting wells with PFOA results between 10 and 12 and sampling additional wells within the consent decree area. Results from the initial resampling effort, targeting homes between 10 and 12 parts per trillion, have indicated that 30% of the homes tested increased, 29% decreased, and 41% remained approximately the same. So Golder has been collecting a second set of samples from all wells previously sampled only once that exhibited results between the detection limit and 10 parts per trillion. And as of July 26th, second samples have been collected from approximately 1,165 properties, which represents approximately 95% of the targeted properties for resampling. Lab analytical results for the second samples from properties that exhibited detections between that ND and 10 parts per trillion have indicated that between 5 and 10% of those resampled properties have exhibited exceedances of the drinking water standard. So these properties have been issued bottled water eligibility letters. And then moving on to previously unsampled wells within the CD area. St. Gobain submitted sampling addendum 18 on January 8th, as I indicated, which expanded sampling to a small number of properties consistent with the methodology that they had developed. DES has been conducting sampling at the remaining homes within the outer boundary of the consent decree that St. Gobain has not yet offered to sample. The sampling effort was initiated in March of this year, and as of September 11th, this month, just a few days ago, Approximately 82 residences have either been sampled or scheduled to be sampled. Results have been received for samples collected from 78 properties. Of the results received, approximately 10% of the properties have exhibited an exceedance of the current ambient groundwater quality standard, 12 parts per trillion, and 70% exceed the newly promulgated EPA MCL of 4 parts per trillion. Approximately 68 property owners have not responded to the sample invitation, and 1 has declined sampling. DES has notified eligible residents by mail on 3 separate occasions. We don't plan to send out additional mailers at this time, but we'll continue sampling properties when requests are received. So regarding previously unresponsive properties, we provided notification letter via letter on April 2nd of this year to approximately 900 property owners that had previously not been responsive to the company's request to conduct sampling on their wells. These were properties previously identified for sampling, but who had not responded to the initial letters or had not returned access agreements after being provided one. DES letters notified property owners of their eligibility to be sampled and requested that they contact the company's consultant to have the sampling completed. The company's consultant has indicated that they've received significant response from this effort, about 100 calls from property owners based on the mailing. So the updates as of August 26th, which reflects, the update reflects addendum 18 proposed sampling. 3,867 properties have been identified for sampling. 3,855 access agreements have been sent, and the return rate is about 72%. 2,563 samples collected from water supply wells. That's 15 more than our June report. 1,169 second samples have been collected from water supply wells, and that includes just under 1,000 samples collected since June of 23. And then 1,151 properties have been offered bottled water, and that's 12 more than the June report. And then lastly, regarding the site investigation, as we've discussed, a remedial action plan was submitted back in May of 23. We met with the company and their consultant in June of that year, and they, based on those discussions, they decided to submit a RAP addendum. DES met with the company and their representatives in December of 23 to discuss the contents of that RAP addendum, and which was submitted on February 9th, 2024. And DES anticipates providing comment on the RAP and the RAP addendum. We thought we'd have that letter out by this meeting, but it's going to be a little bit later. But I would anticipate before the end of the month, our response letter will go out on that, and I'd be happy to share that at the next meeting. And so the rest of my notes will include remedy implementation graphs that have been requested. And just to quickly go over those, if we talk about water, so on a community basis, POET installations are complete in, if we look across all the communities, just over 88% of the properties have been identified for POETs. And in Bedford, that amounts to about 85.5%. In Litchfield, it's actually closer to 97%. And in and then water line connections in Litchfield, about 77% of those have been completed. POET installations for Hudson, there's only about 8, and 100% of those have been completed. And POET installations for Londonderry, about 93% have been completed. And there'll be individual, not just percentages, but total numbers, so you get an idea what the raw data looks like with those. And then in Merrimack, POET installations, about 78% complete. And you'll be able to see all those when you get the minutes along with the notes that I'll be providing. And with that, I will be happy to answer questions.
Maureen?
I heard you say, which was wonderful to hear, did I get that right? That the well rebate program, people are now eligible over 4 parts.
That's correct.
So wonderful, because as we know, at the end of the day, it's about health protection. But it still bothers me, and I'm sure other people heard that too, that St. Gobain is still looking at the between 10 and 12, which ones are going over 12, ND to 10. do we have any plans here of applying the same standard as we're applying to the private well rebates to Saint-Gobain? Because they should be adhering to that 4 parts at this point. I would like to see that updated. Is there a reason that can't be done?
Yeah, we're working on, looking at what we need to do would be, our water division would need to initiate rulemaking to establish the MCL, and then subsequently the AGQS at that level. And that there's certainly discussions about that going on, but that has not been done as of
Do you
yet.
need any of the reps in your committee to help you on that? I'm sure they'd be willing. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Maureen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Wimsatt. Very detailed, very thorough as always. Picking up on the rebate issue, also very glad to hear that. As I recall, there was a tax implication to that has not yet been resolved. So I bring this up for 2 reasons. First of all, to see if there's any comment on that. And second of all, to keep it at the forefront of everyone. I know our congressman has been working very hard to address that. And so just wanting to keep that on the radar because it is a very important matter. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mindy?
Thanks for that update, Mike. Couple of questions. I apologize if I missed them when you addressed them, but glad to hear about the wastewater pipes being plugged. Is there any effort, I'm going to focus right now on the on-site stuff. Is there any effort underway to do something about any remaining contamination on the roof and the stormwater system?
Yeah, that's something we are concerned about, and and Saint-Gobain knows that. I didn't mention, but I think it bears mentioning that we understand that the company is still considering and hopes to make a decision by the end of this calendar year whether they might actually whether they would try to market the facility and sell it, or whether they might like to demolish the facility. And if they were to demolish it, that would mean obviously demolishing the roof as well. We believe that because of the way the roof is constructed and the associated roof drainage systems for stormwater are constructed, and the long history of discharge of air emissions of PFAS, we have clear data that when there is a rain event, that we do see in spikes in PFAS concentrations in stormwater. So that's something we're concerned about. I mean, I think if we had our druthers, we would like to see a demolition of the facility because that would be a clear way to address that. But they're still working on making that decision, and we've asked them to keep us abreast of the progress on that.
A follow-up to that. So would it be within the purview of DES to require them to replace the roof? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I don't know that I would comment
demolish.
on. Beg your pardon?
If they don't demolish it.
Right. Well, yeah, suffice to say, they're going to need to solve that problem. And I think demolition may be the simplest way to do it. Demolition is not simple, and it's expensive, but in terms of, clearly if the roof's gone, then it no longer can contribute to contamination of stormwater. But one way or another, they're going to need to address that. And there may be more than 1 or 2 ways to do that, but that's going to need to be addressed.
One more follow-up. Regarding the waste that they deposited in landfills around the area, is that going to be, I know the immediate concern, of course, is about drinking water. And while they're closing up shop, they have put some of their waste historically in landfills around the town and the area. Is that something DES is going to move on addressing with them?
I'm not sure how much information we really have about that. I mean, as far as our work on the site proper and treating it as a contaminated site and getting a remedial action plan and such, that's not likely to be tied to whatever offsite disposal activities they may have engaged in. But certainly, I mean, it's hard to talk about. It's difficult to talk about it because in the absence of a specific information at a specific facility and a particular concern, I don't really want to comment on it because I don't know. I will tell you, we don't have, as I understand it, we don't have any current discussions going on with any particular facilities about the nature of materials that might have been disposed of from the company.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Mike. That was a great update. I'm just wondering, actually, you and I have spoken, but I just wondered if we could just put this so that a lot of people we suggest that they listen to our commission meeting so that they understand the whole picture. And I know I had asked a while ago. I learned that some of the equipment that was kept on the grounds at St. Cobain was obviously they're leaving and being moved or sold or transferred elsewhere. And my question was, and I'm asking if you could explain the reasons why or the decisions made. What is the process? What is DES doing, or what kind of oversight is being required of those things that are currently or have been on that property and have moved, either been sold or given away? So things like, and the question I had originally was the trailers. They had empty trailers on the lot that I know have been moved. And so if you could just maybe share what I know the DES, I don't want to misquote, and I would rather have you say it so people understand. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so great question. So it has to be said, much of the internal machinery, the towers and the coating operations and such, that material was largely scrapped. So I think most of that went for its steel value. And no, we did not, chase down or impose any specific requirement. We didn't oversee that process. Now, obviously, the company was engaging with vendors and with transporters, and they made whatever arrangements they made, but we did not exert any regulatory oversight over that. As far other than to be sure that we kept an eye that they're completing their work and decommissioning. We've been through the facility. There's not much left there at this point. It's pretty much an empty building. As far as materials or storage trailers and such that might have been stored or staged outside the facility, similarly, they're at liberty to sell those or scrap them or whatever the case may be, and that's what they've been doing. There's still some storage containers and equipment outside the building. That is, there was active shipping going on the day that we were there, so they're still doing a lot of work to move things off. They were collecting some waste. They had Clean Harbors there that was taking some waste away that day. So there's still, a few things going on. But to state plainly, we've not exerted a lot of oversight over the disposition of equipment or materials that left the facility, other than, obviously regulated materials, hazardous waste, solid waste that went off for disposal. Those are subject to the usual regulatory controls, and we would get notice of the manifest. If they manifest hazardous waste off the site, ships hazardous waste, we would get a copy of the manifest, and we would track to make sure that, as we do with all hazardous waste that are shipped in the state, to make sure that those wastes made it to their intended facility. You're muted, Representative.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. But there's no oversight or requirement for them to decontaminate anything that's been on that lot, like those trailers, et cetera. DES has not mandated that they do anything, that they can just move them wherever they want without. I mean, and why I say this, and I know it was raised, we had at a town council meeting, that we worried about obviously the roof of St. Cobain. Well, those trailers also have roofs that have been sitting on the St. Cobain lot. So there's no, and I know our concern as a community was spreading this to other places. We're trying to stop the contamination. So for us, when, there was a concern when we're decommissioning or shutting down a plant and sending out equipment and things that have been exposed in very close proximity to that building. So that was the crux of the question. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Don, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for your summary, Mike. I was just wondering, as far as the, you said that the DES, your office is planning on submitting a letter back to WSP on the remedial action plan addendum Are you at liberty to discuss what, is that an approval letter or is it a comment letter? Can you expound at all on that? I'm just curious what the finding of the letter is.
I mean, it's a comment letter, but I wouldn't discuss it any further than that.
Okay.
It'll be out relatively soon, and then be happy to have a more detailed discussion about it at the next meeting.
Okay, that's good. I know I've done my own review, and being appointed on this commission as a environmental professional appointee, and in that field and educated in that field, I did review the remedial action plan. And for what it's worth, there are things in there I'm not understanding. They evaluated a cutoff wall that went along DW Highway to prevent off-site water from coming onto the property, groundwater. And it's a little different than, my background and understanding is you'd want to put a cutoff wall down gradient of the contamination so you capture everything and funnel all the contaminated groundwater to a place where you can pump and treat it. And they didn't offer that as even an option that they evaluated, if I'm not mistaken. So I was just, hopefully there would be something like that would come back to the drawing board. It would make more sense to do it that way than to block off-site groundwater from coming onto the property and not really treating the most contaminated water. And as you know, and as you mentioned before, is the one of the reasons why they dismissed the pump and treat option was because it's infeasible to get the treated groundwater back down to ambient groundwater quality standards. And obviously, as you mentioned before, they cite that that's being a requirement in the regulations. So I believe you had indicated that that's not been the case on other sites. So I'm wondering if that's something that's a sticking point. Do the regulations need to be amended, and is that something some of our reps can propose, or is that something DES does on their own?
No, I don't think we need to amend the rules about it. I mean, I think, speaking in the abstract here about any site, yes, our rules as a goal and as a requirement are that you meet ambient groundwater quality standards. And when you just establish and develop a remedial action plan, that should be the goal. Having said that, there are many sites in the state where that is not practically feasible to achieve. But that does not mean that it's okay to do nothing because you can't comply with that standard. So there are many examples where we have, worked with site owners and required them to develop a remedial action plan that we know is not going, at least in the near term, not going to restore groundwater to ambient groundwater quality standards, but in many cases is going to address source areas and substantially reduce the mass of contaminant at the site, or bring the groundwater to a much lower concentration, even though it may not be a concentration that's compliant with AGQS. So that, that if a party is going to say, well, we can't meet the requirements, so we don't have to do anything, that's not the first time that's been tried, and we're not persuaded by that.
And my understanding is that's kind of the definition of a brownfield site, when you reduce the contamination, but not necessarily down to drinking water quality. It's a site that remains with a restriction on it. Watson Park in Merrimack's an example of that. So I think, and it sounds like I'm kind of probably just beating a dead horse here, but yeah. I'm happy to hear that sticking point in the plan that they cite is not necessarily the case. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to be pedantic, but my brownfield staff would want me to correct you on one thing, that certainly some brownfield sites, that's what happened, but there are many brownfield sites where we actually successfully remediate them to meeting standards. So I just wanted to clear that. But you're right, there's certainly plenty of hazardous waste sites where it's not feasible to get to ambient groundwater quality standards right away, or in some cases maybe ever. But that doesn't mean we don't work to limit and reduce the contamination as much as possible.
Right. Thank you.
Nancy?
Sorry, one more quick question. Just to the point you had mentioned about the water connections, and I had put a note on our social media page here, local social media page a while ago, about the Brenda Lane extensions. And it was back in, I told them that there would be groundbreaking in July because that was the information we had at the time. Am I understanding, I just want to be correct, that the actual connections won't possibly be until 2025?
Yeah, let me look back at my notes on that. I want to make sure I get it right.
You said something about there was an amendment to the contract, and I don't, what is that? What is it?
Yeah, you know what? I'll just go over that again so that
Okay.
happy to do that. Let me just find it here. So, yeah, the company's consultant finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack, Wildcat, Brenda Lane service connections. Service application requests have been provided to all the eligible properties. Work associated with the water main extension on Brenda, John, and Edward Lanes has not started, while the company and the contractor complete an amendment to the contract that will include the town of Merrimack on the bond. So the contractor believes that the water main installation itself will be completed this calendar year, but that connections to the water main may extend into 2025.
Thank you. Thanks,
So
Mike.
yes, you're correct. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks, Mike. I was just confused and I just didn't want to misrepresent them.
All right. And if you or your constituents need any further updates or specific questions on that, I would encourage you to reach out to Andy Fuller directly.
Yeah,
He's the one that puts these together for me. He's the original source of the information, and he's always most up to date on where things are at on any given day. So if you can't reach him, reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with him for sure.
Yeah, no, I actually did, and he had given me the update after when we didn't see it in July. I had talked to Andy, and then I followed actually up with the town manager and just asked. They said it was a contract. It was at that point it was I don't know, some kind of permit issue, and so now it's a contract issue. But okay, thank you. Andy's great.
It's a bonding issue, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Mike? Just sort of wrap up, Mike, by saying I appreciate DES pushing forward with those areas near the edge of the outer boundary, and sadly the effort has been vindicated, I think, or the interest in having it done by the results. So appreciate pushing forward with that. We'll move on to Leanne Atwell for DHHS update.
All right. Good afternoon. I've got start out with an update about the Merrimack cancer investigation. Dartmouth and HHS continue to meet with the project's advisory board. So that is the community advisory board and the scientific advisory board. And they've also continued to meet with the project steering committee. The team continues to work on analyzing the cancer data and have been working closely with members of the
That was inauspicious timing. I think we lost impact. Not sure if there's a way to message Leanne.
Hi, sorry about that.
I'm guessing, yeah. She's probably just rebooting.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, yes. Can't see you.
I don't know, like all of a sudden everything, all the lights in my house just flashed off. So I don't know what that's all about. And now it seems like my camera is not working. Let me see if I can fix that. Sorry about that.
What uncanny timing.
Maybe we should let Leanne go first from now on.
There you are.
We can see you.
Can't hear you though.
update it.
How about now?
Yes,
Okay.
not fast.
Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. All right. So I think I was saying that the team is still working on analyzing the cancer data, cancer registry data, and been working with the scientific advisory board on the process for that analysis. So there's been a lot of work that's been done so that the older data can be analyzed alongside with the newer data. The way the data were coded has changed in recent years, and so there was a lot of work to go back through the older data to match it up so that it can be synced up with the current data. And so they are working on updating the analysis now. As was pointed out previously, I had incorrectly said at the last meeting that our original analysis looked at data from 2008 to 2019. It was actually 2008 to 2018 was that prior data analysis. So with the new analysis, they'll be looking at data from 1995 to 2021, which is the most recent date that data are available. The team is still working on the study design and the IRB review protocol. The community engagement studios have all been completed. There were 4 studios that were on June 29th, July 12th, July 18th, and August 7th. And I want to thank everyone for your efforts in helping us recruit participants for the studio. I know there was a lot of discussion about how we could recruit as many participants as possible. So I just want to go through a list of what we ended up doing for recruitment. We obviously a lot of word of mouth. Thank you for all of your efforts on that. We had a flyer that was shared on social media. We ran a paid social media ad that was targeting in the southern New Hampshire area. We posted flyers at town halls and libraries in the 9 towns in the study area. So that's Amherst, Bedford, Hollis, Hudson, Litchfield, Londonderry, Manchester, Merrimack, and Nashua, and also posted flyers at several YMCA facilities. We offered in-person options, but Zoom was preferred by all of the participants. So all of the studios were actually held online. We offered times across a mixture of daytime, weekend, and evening time frames. So during the studios, participants were asked for their perspective on the study, issues in the community, and asked for guidance on how the study should be conducted. There were a total of 38 participants in all 4 studios, which is about the number that we were shooting for, so we're happy with that. There was a good range of participation that covered multiple towns in and outside of the Merrimack area, with a good age range and a number of years spent in Merrimack. So the team's currently working on a summary of those themes from the studios, and hopefully we'll be able to share that. I think the plan is to share that at the next community advisory board meeting. So once we have that summary, I can share the key information here as well. So the team's also working on a survey with the UNH Survey Center. And the point of the survey is to gauge interest and participation in a research study, and also to help us fill in some gaps about known risk factors. The survey is going to be sent out near the end of September. It'll be a statewide survey with more of an emphasis on recruitment in the Merrimack and surrounding communities. So the main topics are going to be concerns about environmental issues and how those might impact health. Get an understanding of risk factors for kidney cancers, such as smoking, exercise, understanding of health history and residential history, and willingness to take part in an actual research study, which could involve completing additional surveys, providing water samples, and providing blood samples. The online questionnaire that we have aimed at soliciting community feedback is still on our website and will remain active through the end of the study period. So that's the update about the cancer investigation. And then similar update to previous months, the PFAS clinicians guidance, we're still working on getting that updated. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lorraine.
One of the, I joined one of the studios and an issue came up, and it may have come up at other ones. So from a public perspective, great work has been done here. But as we know, this is a very delineated, specific as science is. It's very targeted to kidney cancer. So I was pleased that it wasn't me asking this question. It was a resident at large who I didn't even know, and I was so proud of them. And they were inquiring as to the process for other cancers. So if a member of the public notes this and says, okay, so they're new, this person was pretty new, they haven't been in the weeds like some of us here have been for way too long. And what they had noted is kind of a newbie is we're focusing on one. We did that original CIR. We did the second CIR for Merrimack only. We requested that Bedford and Londonderry have, an initial CIR. But the point that I made like 7 years ago when we started this process was, we know the true contamination area, right? So what I like about this is we are now saying, let's look at the true contamination area, not just a town, and let's look at the scope of what's happening, in a longer period of time, instead of the original 5-year limit, which was still pretty dated. So the question that this resident came up with that I would like to see done, the team can't do this because they have their directives, from the state and the legislative funding directives. But I would like to see if we could, we could gather that data and do a parallel to this. If we take that 95 to 2021 time period, and we take that original table of the cancers that were analyzed, that data is available. And if we gather that data from the true contamination area, now we look and say, is it higher than expected? Is it statistically significant? I think that could give us a richer picture because many residents are continuing to say, multiple cancers in their households, within the same individual, multiple cancers, streets, you've heard those stories, we've all heard them from people, neighborhoods with patterns that people are seeing. So is that something that could be not going to be done next week? I know this, but is that something that your department has the capacity to do in collaboration, or do we have to revisit that from a legislative ask?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that is something that that was I don't know if it came up in other studios, but obviously it was something that that came up when we were talking about kind of key findings from the studios. The work that Dartmouth is doing right now is really focused specifically on the kidney cancer, and so any additional work would need to be something that we'd have to look at through the our cancer program. And see what what might be possible. So I know that was raised, as particularly as you're looking at that older data, it wasn't coded the same way. So there really was quite a bit of work that went through and kind of matching that. And so I would suspect that it would need to be a similar process with other types of cancer as well. So it's not as straightforward as you might think initially. But that is something that that's been discussed as what outside of the study, like what other options might there be, and are there methodologies and code that's being developed as part of this kidney cancer study that could help us look at other data as well. And I think that's we're still taking a look at that and don't have a definitive answer right now. So yeah.
But I wanted to put it out there because I think it's great, because we have a model now that, as you know, is a very updated, it's a good model, right? It really makes sense as a model. So if we apply that standard and go back and revisit the other cancers in term of the issues that were there with the whole contamination area, I think it would be absolutely helpful, data rich, maybe people will have things in their careers to work on the rest of their lives, no doubt, but very helpful to the community also. Thank you.
Rosemary.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Leanne, you mentioned about a statewide questionnaire that you're going to do. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, how's it going to be distributed?
Yeah, so that is through the UNH Survey Center and the Granite State Panel that they have, and they routinely send out surveys statewide. And so it will be statewide, but I think they're going to over-select and send it out to more people in southern New Hampshire to see if there's any differences in geographies in terms of particularly some of those other risk factors for kidney cancer, if there's anything specific to the southern New Hampshire area. And I don't know the details about how they actually send that out, but I can certainly get more information and share that in terms of the logistics. But the survey center routinely sends out these surveys, and so it's something that they're very skilled at doing.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, what's the time frame on that mailing?
They're hoping to start it in September, at the end of September. So, I think we were working on a pretty final draft of the survey, a couple of days ago. So I don't know how long it stays open and how long it takes for them to get the results back and compile them and analyze them. I would imagine it takes a little bit of time.
The reason I ask is with the campaign, presidential campaign, and all the mailers that are coming out, in terms of getting a response, there may be, and a lot of people, they see another mailer and they just write in the trash. Have you had any concern about the timing on that?
That's a really good point. I don't know. Dartmouth has really been leading the discussions with the survey center. We've not really been involved with that, so I can. It's a good point. I can bring that up and see if that's something that they've talked about. I know that's impacting some of our other efforts with other programs and messaging about like radon awareness and testing your home for radon, and putting that on the back burner for a couple of months because of that reason. So yeah, it's a really good point.
Any other questions for Leanne? If not, we'll move on to talk about legislation. I know we have a brief window coming up for incumbents to submit LSRs. I don't know if there's anything that you're aware of, Maureen, or anybody else.
Well, thank you. I don't know of any legislation that's been filed, and the first filing period actually ends today. There is another filing period after the general election that'll be in November. But since we last met, 3 bills have been signed into law that we are tracking. They are all House bills. House Bill 1114, 1649, 1613. One bill, since we last met, has been vetoed, and Representative Murphy may want to discuss that more, but that's House Bill 1415. Veto day is October 10th. We will all meet again and take up that particular bill. The veto message is in the House calendar. And brief summary, as you know, we've had 2 tracking charts, 2003 and 2023, 2024. 24 bills total in those 2 charts. According to my count, 10 of those bills have either been signed into law or incorporated in the budget last year, 10 of 24. And that will conclude my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Any questions about Maureen's report? Nancy, did you want to comment on 1415 at all?
Sure, just to say that it was disappointing that this bill went through the House and Senate on a voice vote and was well supported. And it would have really benefited us in that places like St. Gobain, who would have been held accountable to provisions of federal regulations when closing down or decommissioning. And, we talked earlier about all of the things Merrimack residents are having to bear the costs of. And ultimately, this is one of those other things that will cost us again. So it's unfortunate that the governor vetoed it. I'm certainly hoping that there will be an overturn on October 10th. But sometimes, even though there was across the board support for this bill, sometimes when the message the governor sends is he doesn't want it, then people change their votes, and that's unfortunate. So we'll see. We'll hold out and hope for the best on October 10th.
Maureen?
There was also one other bill that had a little snafu. I don't remember which one it was, but you guys know, when we had the reference, I think it was yours, Nancy, with the, looking at the water standards of 100 parts per trillion, for site contamination. And then somehow the governor wrapped that into the HB 1649, which had an amendment slipped in there, which named it at 10,000 parts. For what was that, groundwater on site and things like that. 10,000 parts. I mean, come on, so I don't know if that was I don't think it was in your bill, Nancy. I think it was in a combination.
Yeah, that was, you're referencing it, the HB 1415, but in
It was.
the other
Yeah.
part, in 1649, the definition of PFAS was unfortunately changed.
Yes.
And
yes.
yeah,
So,
amendments happen and
right.
bills
The
change.
governor cited, right? Am I right? In his veto letter, he cited, oh, we already have that covered in 1649. 10,000 parts per trillion. Come on, folks. So
Yeah.
good luck on veto day. I'll have you in my thoughts and prayers, all of you, because there was tremendous support in the House and the Senate, which was wonderful. I was really pleased with how the votes went on both. So you guys and your respective parties, I think you can get out there, and if you need any help, writing letters or something, we can make that point. Thank you.
That would be good. That would be good. I hope Merrimack does. I'd love to see some real support from the town.
For the state,
message that
everyone, if we, the whole thing is, we all know source pollution is what we have to get at, not throw money at the end point. And, if you're going to say, 10,000 is cool, and you're in the other one, because, the people up there have learned so much about PFAS, right? In Concord, all our elected officials in the House and Senate over the last X amount of years. So they were well aware what 100 parts means. 6, 7, 8 years ago, what would that mean? Everybody was going around squawking about the drop in the Olympic size swimming pool back then, but now people are aware about the differences and why it's so important. So we're not in line with where the nation is going or trying to go. The DOD is not okay with where the nation is going, but the rest of us are.
the lobbyists for polluters have a lot of influence. And we, the representatives who are filing these bills, are trying to represent the people. And so, the voices of the public should be, one would think, would be listened to, but that doesn't always happen. We don't have attorneys to represent us. We have, citizen legislators elected to be our voice. So therein lies a big part of the problem.
Don?
Yeah, on that same subject, I was just curious. I might have asked this before. I don't remember if anybody had an answer, but other than the St. Gobain property, I don't know if there's another site in the state that has contaminated PFOA or a regulated compound at 10,000 parts per trillion or more. So I don't know if this bill is only applicable to one property potentially, that, with the limit at the 10,000 parts per trillion. I don't know if anybody knows that answer, but it's a question that's begged to be asked.
I
Mike,
bet
I don't-
firefighting foam sites.
I'm sorry. Mike, do you have any insight on that? Are there other sites with releases of that order of magnitude that you?
Yeah, our records would reflect that there are at least 3. So it includes St. Gobain, the TCI site in Amherst, and the Lidl facility in Rochester.
Thanks for that.
Okay. Mindy?
So not firefighting foam sites?
I don't have all the data memorized, but I don't necessarily know of one where we have that concentration. And again, it's important to understand the scope of that. That was Senator Ricciardi's bill, Senate Bill 413, that was in play in the legislature. And then at the end, it more or less in total got incorporated into House Bill 1649. And of course, 1649 did a lot of things, including which nobody's mentioned the PFAS ban, which is kind of burying the lead on that. But Representative Evil would probably be disappointed that nobody talked about that. But with regard to Senate Bill 413, my understanding is that Senator Ricciardi was looking to ensure that her constituents who have wells who believe that their wells have been impacted by emissions from St. Cobain, but are outside the consent decree, would have a firmer legal footing and a right of action to require a remedy from the responsible party. And it's not setting a floor or a ceiling for liability under the statute for PFAS contamination. That's not what it was doing. And in the and as many of you know, legislators here on the call, when you're trying to get legislation passed, you've got a lot of diverse voices who have expressed concerns in various areas, and there were members of the business community that expressed concern that it was the scope of it was too broad. And I think, I won't speak for Senator Ricciardi, but at the end of the day, she was willing to entertain an amendment that increased that threshold concentration for this particular right of action in order to try to serve her constituents. And that's how it unfolded. But I think a lot of people have suggested that it somehow creates this, wipes away potential responsibility for a whole host of PFAS polluters, and it really doesn't do that.
Just add to that, what it does is for people outside the CD area primarily, but I suppose within, a remedy that's comparable to what's available within the CD area for poets, goes beyond the rebates to provide repeat testing, not at the wrongdoer's expense, as well as operation and maintenance. So it goes well beyond the cost of initial installation. So with that, it's getting late. So unless there's other comments about legislation, I just want to wrap up by saying I will continue to take input on what Rosemary, I don't know if you were moving your hand or you had a comment.
Well, Maureen and I had a meeting last night of the membership committee, and I believe she has a report.
Okay.
Thank you. I was going to make mention of that. Yes, Representative Rung and I had a very productive meeting last night of the membership committee, and a few things. Now, you may recall that I sent around a membership chart for this commission, and I very carefully laid out the law and matched it up with an individual to be sure that our membership is correct. So a few updates regarding that. First of all, as of July 12th of this year, Hudson is now added to this commission. Therefore, there are 2 Hudson-specific openings on our commission, one of which is a representative from the town, from the governing body of the town, and the other one is a member of a drinking water related environmental advocacy citizen organization. So that's the first issue regarding our membership. We need 2 members from Hudson to fill those slots. Representative Murphy and Representative LaSalle. On the chart, those individuals are mentioned as appointees of the majority or minority offices, but it came to light that they may actually be in the slot of having been appointed from their towns. So that then would open up additional legislative slots from both the minority and majority offices. Perhaps we can have more clarification from those 2 representatives, but that was another issue identified from the meeting Representative Rung and I had last evening. And then lastly, there are 2 individuals on the membership chart that, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, have never been to a meeting. And so it seems likely that those individuals should be replaced, or perhaps at least approached with regard to their membership on this commission, as those are very valuable seats that are just not being utilized. I can tell you which seats they are. One is a representative from the town of Litchfield. So it would be the representative appointed from the town of Litchfield. And the other, just bear with me a moment, is the representative from Londonderry. So the town appointee from the town of Londonderry. And that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Run, but I think that concludes a good summary of our meeting on the membership subcommittee of this commission.
Yeah, one point I wanted to make, Representative Mooney, is I believe Representative LaSalle actually he is the town representative for Litchfield, because I believe he's on the Board of Selectmen. He's not on the commission because of his nomination by the Speaker of the House.
All right.
So that would just leave a citizen representative needed from Litchfield.
What I can do is not only move him on the chart, but notify the majority office. And Representative LaSalle, I think he was on the phone earlier. Are you on the phone? Perhaps not. Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
Thank you, Maureen, for that. I'm just wondering, since it's election time, maybe we should forego. I mean, I think it's good to have the information upon which spots need to be filled, but none of us know whether we're going to be here shortly in we've got an election in 7 or 8 weeks. So to appoint somebody that might not stay appointed, or that our roles might switch in appointment. I think right now I'm serving in the town role. But, you know, I mean, that of course, as long as I'm a town councilor, but I just filling in slots, I wonder if it makes sense to keep the list that we have, put that together, and then at election time, look to fill those slots based on whatever's open. Because who knows if any of us will be here.
That's a fair point. Representative Rung, are you okay with that? Sort of almost taking this up again after the November election? Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be the best course of action. But I think in the meantime, we could explore some of the citizen reps from that, you know, from those communities. Maybe Lori knows from her work with citizens for clean water, for safe water. Maybe she may know contacts in those towns.
Outside of Merrimack, and I mean, there was the Londonderry group. They've been very quiet as of this year with kind of getting what they really were looking for. You know, some people, it depends. You know, we're epicenter, so our bandwidth is compelled to do a little more. There are people who say once they have a solution and know their wells are remediated, they're satisfied. Hudson has not been active officially or unofficially. There is a person from Manchester who has been advocating, but I don't think Manchester is covered, you know, by this committee. But I've engaged everywhere, and I've never had engagement from Hudson. And then, you know, it's been really Bedford, Merrimack, and historically Londonderry. And Litchfield, you know, has been pretty ambivalent about this for a variety of reasons also. So Hudson, how do we reach out to Hudson? I really don't know. I think we would check with the town council and ask
Probably,
if have
yeah,
any
maybe.
concerns.
Well, maybe a good starting point might be their conservation commission.
That would be a good member, a conservation commission meeting, you know, member in any community. You know, I know in Merrimack, we tried to engage them, Nancy and I, many years ago, because it should be something they should be aware of and updated on. It's the environment, right? Yeah. So you guys know who your reps are in Hudson. I mean, I know of.
I'll make some inquiries. The chair of the resources committee, I'll see him next week. Andy Renzullo, he's from Hudson, so I'll get some names from him.
Good.
Okay, Good. Thank you for keeping tabs on that. It will be challenging after November, but needs to be done, and especially getting Hudson, now that they're making us have a higher quorum number, to get them involved as well. Okay, so unless there's other business, I'll just wrap up by saying continue to provide me with input if you have it on annual report. Our next meeting coming up in October is going to be on the 11th at 2 p.m. and no public comment, and so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make that move. I'll second.
Okay, motion by Maureen, second by Rosemary. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I don't see any dissenters, so with that, our meeting is concluded. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good weekend.
Chris, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.